Okay, we get the time here. Sure. Okay. Now, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat siang. Welcome to AIYA Jawa Barat webinar, our first online discussion. And now we, as our first online discussion today, we doing this interesting topic. We're gonna discuss more about the future collaboration on Australia-Indonesia relationship. It's because AIYA, as the Australia-Indonesia Youth Association now, in responding to the pandemic, we also moved to online, and then we have this discussion to at least we can still discuss meet each other, and also meet each other, I mean virtually. And then we also didn't want to stop here. I mean, the pandemic is going on, but we know that more collaboration will definitely we can foster in the future. So to start the webinar, I'm so glad that everyone can join in, and then I know that you guys from all over community organizations, campus, and universities. So I encourage you guys to register as a member, as I am a member, and maybe later in the end of the webinar, I will send you the link if you want to request the e-certificate. And also, if you want to ask questions as well. So Dio, as a moderator, will be hosting, and then help you guys with that. Okay, so Dio, you want to start it?
All right, thank you, Evelyn. I'd like to say welcome to everyone. First of all, on behalf of AIYA Jawa Barat Committee, I would like to say thank you for your spare time, for you to spare time to join this discussion. And also high appreciation goes to both of our speakers today, Clarice and Hikmawan, which I will introduce later. Thank you so much for being here and then to help us guide this discussion, hopefully. And I would like to introduce the first speakers, Hikmawan Saifullah. He's a PhD candidate in politics at Asia Research Center in Murdoch University, Perth. And he also lecturing in international relations in Pajajaran University in Bandung, also in Parahyangan University. Besides his academic life, he was also active in Bandung underground music scene. So that's where I knew him actually, and we've known personally for quite a while. And he actually is the one who persuaded me to join AIYA, because before I didn't know anything about Australia, Indonesia, honestly, and now I'm here. So thank you for that as well. He was also in a band from 2001 and stopped touring with the band in 2013 to continue his academic life now. And the second one, we have Clarice. She's AIYA National President. She also worked for Victorian government as a director of TAFE in Jakarta. So she now reside in Jakarta. And she's been doing the initiative between Australia and Indonesia for quite a long time, actually. She's really into it. So I think that's all. And I'm Dio Pamungkas. I'm currently the socio-cultural lead in AIYA Jawa Barat. So hopefully you all can enjoy this discussion. So, well, last December, we've just celebrated or commemorated the 70th year of Australia-Indonesia diplomatic relations. And yeah, it was marked from the 1949 when Australian government acknowledged Indonesian independence. And since then, we set off, and then a lot of dynamics happened. So then, yeah, I would like to use this moment to make a reflect on us, on what have we done, what have we achieved in these past years, and what can we see in the future. So yeah, for that, I would like to hand over the session to Hikmawan Saifullah, but he's not there. So yeah,
Hang on,
the
I
discussion.
think he might come back in a second.
Yeah, we'll wait.
Yeah. But yeah, maybe just to quickly comment on that. So yeah, 27th of December 2019 of Australian and Indonesian relations, sort of at a government to government level. As you would all know, most of you being Indonesian, obviously it was a turbulent period after independence in 1945, and so it was several years before other countries officially recognized Indonesia's independence. But yeah, it's a great, I guess, commemoration for our two countries together to look towards, what are we going to be participating on together in the future, as well as what have we done in the past, and reflect on that sort of thing. So yeah, maybe Pak Hikmawan, if you want to give us some comments on the Australia-Indonesia diplomatic relationship, that would be really good.
All right, thank you everyone. Good day, selamat siang, salam sejahtera, assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I've been living in and out of Australia for many years, and honestly, I've been trying to imitate the way Australians speak, especially with the slangs. It never worked. So I try to avoid that as best as I can, because the more I try to do it, the more it sounds really weird. Even my wife said, just don't. Anyway, I'm happy to be here, and I would like, first of all, say thank you to AIYA's West Java Chapter Committee members, especially Evelyn and Dio, for inviting me to speak with Clarice in one of your fascinating events. The last time I speak in your event was in 2016, yeah, when I was asked by AIYA to share my experiences and tips in applying for scholarships. It's Australia-wide scholarships, if I'm not mistaken. The scholarships that many of us young Indonesians want to get in order to pursue their further study in Australia, as the country which offers a great range of options for studying in higher degrees. I think it was Tom Brown. It was Tom, who was the president of AIYA, West Java chapter at the time, that invited me. Since that event, I become friends. Wait, there's a technical problem here because I've written some points that I wanted to make and it's gone. I hate this when it happens. Just give me a minute. Okay, got it. So yeah, I think it was Tom who invited me to be the speaker at AIYA's event at the time, and the event was attended by many young people who are pursuing study in Australia, and of course, some information about how to get there is very important to them. And I think my name was also recommended by another AIYA member who is also my former student. His name's Dwiki Chandra Wibowo. I don't know if Clarice and Evelyn knows him. He's a very
Yeah.
bright and passionate student, as I still remember when I was still having him in my class. So it's good to know that some of my students are engaged in this Australia-Indonesia relationship. Since that event, actually, Tom and I become very close, though we came from two different cultures, and actually, Tom and I had one thing in common, which I assume is actually what made us can be close with one another, and that is music, particularly underground rock music. Yeah, whether it's punk rock, heavy metal, Tom is more like into heavy metal actually. I don't know if you any guys here know, or maybe Clarice knows, or maybe Baya knows because he's from Adelaide. Tom himself was a former guitarist of a famous death metal band from Adelaide. It's called Asphyxia. And this band was very famous around mid 2000s. So yeah, he was popular at the time. And the first time I met Tom at AIYA's event, it was like I couldn't see any metalhead identifications in you right now. But when you listen to the music, it's really good. All right. Okay. Yeah. His music is really good. And on the other hand, I too was a former guitarist of various underground rock bands, and I've been in the music scene since the mid 1990s. I started a punk band called Habenagen with my schoolmates from Pesantren. Although it was not as famous as Asphyxia in Australia, it was the beginning of my music career. And eventually my involvement there in the music scene has led me to create another band called Alone at Last, which was born in 2002 and still active today, but I resigned from the band in 2013 because I got a scholarship to pursue my PhD in Murdoch University. So Tom did not know, or probably none of us aware, that the city that we're living, Bandung, used to be known as one of the world's largest underground music scene. Since the 1990s, Bandung, as also other big cities in Indonesia, have been the home for punk rockers, metalheads, and even pop musicians, which we know their names as they often appeared on televisions and radio channels. One day, I took Tom to an underground rock concert, which was held in one of Bandung's popular club called Fame Stations, up in Jalan Serjan Bajuri. Yeah, if you guys like clubbing, you must know the place. I was standing next to Tom, watching a very good local band, a band called After Coma. I slightly laughed to see how he was so surprised when he saw that our musicians and music event organizers had to stop whatever they were doing, including music performance, for a few minutes every time there's a prayer call, adhan. He laughed and he's surprised. And I just realized that this is something new for Tom or any other Aussies, that they never had seen such a thing in any music concert, especially in Australia. In my head, I was like, there you go, Tom. You have learned a little bit of our khasanah budaya lokal. You can be as rock and roll as you can, but never forget to pray. So this is something distinctive here in Indonesia in terms of underground music performances. People start playing music, people drink beer or alcohol, but sometimes they don't forget how to pray. For musicians like Tom and I, we both know that underground rock music scene is not only a place for young people to hang out and enjoy music, but it is also an amazing place where we can express freely ourselves. It also offers a space for building friendship, solidarity, and empowerment. I was very late actually to realize that the music practices which I had been taking part of actually shows a type of politics, where some people call it as the politics of everyday life. And it took me 15 years to also realize that punk rock and underground music performances have provided us an important model for social and cultural interactions. Furthermore, it offers us a model to engage in international relations, or which IR people would call it diplomacy. So if you go to any underground rock concert here or in Australia, especially the DIY concerts or the self-funded events, which receive no funding, any funding from sponsorships, you will notice something unique or unusual in the performing stage. there are no barricades on the stage. Both musicians and audiences are usually blending with one another during the show. And then the musicians sing and perform on the stage, while the audience also singing and dancing chaotically right in front of them. Since there's no barricade, often the audience jump onto the stage, grabbing the microphone and sing and dance together with the musicians, the performing musicians. Likewise, sometimes the musicians jump off the stage and sing and dance or play guitar with the audience in front of the stage. Yeah. Once the performance is finished or done, all musicians and audiences would usually be very sweaty and probably stinky, but they're all satisfied to the fullest of what they have achieved in that underground show. From here, we can draw a lesson. Often we think about relationship, especially here, Indonesia and Australia, as relationships between nations that it has to be conducted through formal interactions. You know, it is mediated by trained diplomats and elite actors which aim to pursue this, their own state interests. You know, this interest can be related to, you know, how to improve the trade and business between the two countries, improving the development programs, or to increase security of the two countries by forming like joint strategic programs. So Indonesian militaries often work together with the Australian militaries in northern part of Australia as a part of this program, as an example, you know. But the thing is, we rarely see relationship between nations as something informal, which usually consists of daily interactions between informal actors, you know. I personally, not a diplomat. I was almost part of Indonesia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs and become diplomat. That's what every IR graduates want to achieve after they graduate. But I choose to be an academic instead. But after studying many years about international relations, I realized that I'm also a diplomat, like you guys, everyone here, you know. Diplomats are not only those who are trained in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in order to engage with the world outside Indonesia or outside Australia, you know. It's actually people like us who are informally engaged on daily basis with them that actually matters. Yeah. Going to conference meetings with international counterparts is often seen as something more important than going to clubs and doing cooking together. Wearing very formal dress and speak elegantly in an international forum is something that is more valued than wearing swimsuits, drinking bir bintang, then swim and surf at Batu Karas. You know, this way of thinking shows how our understanding of building a relationship between two countries or two nations or diplomacy has been dominated or shaped by an elitist point of view, which suggested that elite actors and practices of international relations is more important than the non-elitist actors and practices. You know, think relationship of Australia and Indonesia is like organizing the underground rock shows. We are all matters in the show. There will be no show without the musicians and audience. What makes the show successful is our deep participation and collaboration. No need to think that the musicians are more important than the audience. Without the audience, musicians are nothing. And without the musicians, audience are just nothing. The participations and the collaborations is what matters. Whatever we do counts and matters. And this is also applied in building relationship between Australia and Indonesia. We do not rely on building relationships merely from the perspective or the practices of the diplomats that working in the Indonesian consulate or Indonesian embassies or Australian diplomats working in Jakarta. You know, we actually all responsible. People outside the diplomatic circles, people like us, were actually responsible in building this relationship. And in this situation, we have to see ourselves as a part of this ongoing relationship. In international relations term, there's a term called people-to-people relations, yeah, as an opposed to government-to-government relations. Yeah. So government-to-government is more like elitist practice of diplomacy, while people-to-people interactions is more like informal, like what we do every day. You know, just in spending leisure time, going to, you know, music concerts, or cooking dinner together, or Snapchatting, or sending private messages through Instagrams and all that. You know, actually, people-to-people relations between Indonesia and Australia has been around for like more than 70 years. Actually, Dio, it's been around for like hundreds of years, and we don't know for sure, but maybe I can show you some, what do you call it, PowerPoint. I don't normally good with PowerPoint, but I'll try to share you some of this. Share. There you go. Okay. All right. This is Tom and Dwiki in one of AIYA's event, I think, in 2000.
Dwiki is attending at the moment, Papa.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No wonder
I
you're
invited
so
him.
familiar. You're so familiar, like we've met once, sometime, somewhere. So there you go. And then you're probably in one of these audiences. And I brought some of my underground friends here. I think Dio was there as well. I'm not sure. I like to connect people with, I like to connect my friends to, you know, my friends outside their own circle, you know, building these people-to-people relations. And before I jump into what I was going to talk about, the hundreds of years of relationship between Indonesia and Australia, I just want to show you the picture of how underground shows look like, okay? So it's a bit going back to the previous point that I made. So this is an example of an underground show. Yeah? You can see that the singer or the musicians, he's actually singing together with the audience, yeah? And there's no barriers between them. There's no a special position for the musician, for the musicians on the stage. Audience can jump onto the stage and sing together with the musicians. And this is the situations of the audience floor. They dance, they sing, they watch, and sometimes they just dance together with musicians. It just shows an example of non-elitist cultural practices which can be applied to the model of international relations, a model of diplomacy. Yeah. And the fact is, what made Australia and Indonesia become a very strong neighbors to one another, it's because it's been fostered for hundreds of years. Formally, maybe 70 years, yes, correct, because we have formal diplomatic agreements between the two countries. But every Australian, and maybe every Australian who studied about the relationship between Australia and Indonesia, they know that actually back to 16th, 17th centuries, Indonesians have made contact with indigenous Australians, you know, and it was the Makassar fishermen or the Tripangers which made contact with the indigenous Australians in another part of Australia, especially in Kimberley and Arnhem Land. Yeah. Although the context in this period was actually driven by economic interest, yeah, because the Makassar people, the Bugis people who came there actually harvested some tripang, cook it there, and then sell it elsewhere. And they work together with the indigenous Australians. And this shows an example of how people-to-people relations, actually the foundations of the government-to-government relations, which later happened in the modern times in the mid-20th century. Yeah. And from these hundreds of years of interactions between the Indonesians and the native Australians, you know, there have been a blending or ongoing cultural exchanges between the two people, as we can see from the examples of their art, language, food, and local stories. If you come to Kimberley and you talk with the Yolngu people, you'll be surprised that some of their words have the same words as the language that we use here in Indonesia. Yeah. I believe that these relationships probably is much longer than what the scholars have been acknowledged from the artifact physical evidence that they can found. Yeah. And also, apart from that, Indonesia and Australia have been really strong during the revolutionary time, during the struggle for independence. Yeah. Hundreds of Indonesians, Historia.id mentioned in their research that about 500 Indonesians were migrated forcefully to Australia after the defeat of the Dutch by the Japanese in 1942. So hundreds of Indonesians there living in Sydney, in Melbourne, in Adelaide, in Perth, they live together with Australians. Yeah. This is the time before what we call as Republic Indonesia has been founded. Yeah. They live there together and they get to know each other. And even, as I will tell you later, some of them just live with the locals and married and have children there. Yeah. But the most important thing in this period is that there's a strong collaboration between Indonesia and Australia to help Indonesia become independent from the Dutch. Yeah. I don't know if you have watched this film, this short documentary by Joris Evans. He's a Dutch movie director, movie maker. It's called Indonesia Calling, and you can watch it on YouTube. Yeah, it shows how during that revolutionary time, yeah, when the Japanese were defeated in the World War II and finally defeated in October 1945 in the Pacific region. The Dutch were planning to recolonize Indonesia by sending their ships, including warships, that were pretty much in Australian coast, to go back to Indonesian water, to Indonesian islands, and taking back what they thought the lands that they were, theirs, you know. And then you know what? In solidarity with Indonesians who declared the independence in 1945, many Australian workers and union laborers, they built solidarity with Indonesians by boycotting the Dutch warships so they cannot sail back to Indonesia. And it happened for like, how long? 18 months. Yeah. And you can see in that documentary that the small boats driven by these Australian and Indonesian workers going to the ships in the middle of the sea just to stop everyone in the ship to go to Indonesia. Yeah, it's just amazing. I didn't see this movie until like when I was doing undergraduate study at Unpad. There's this popular library called Perpustakaan Batu Api there, which has a range of amazing films and documentaries that I recommend you to go there. Yeah, yeah. This event was documented by Joris Evans, and it shows that amongst the countries in the world that supported Indonesian independence, it was actually Australia. So Australia and Indonesia relationship has a historical relationship that has been built by great people. You know, among the people that actually helped to build this relationship stronger is actually a couple who joined the struggle for independence. You probably know of, ever read their books called In Love with a Nation. This is the book. Yeah. This is written by Joan Harjono and Charles Warner. It's a story about Molly Bondan, Indonesia. So in the picture you see on the left, that's Molly. On the right, that is Bondan, Muhammad Bondan. So Molly was an Australian woman who joined Central Committee for Indonesian Independence in Brisbane as she supported Indonesian struggle for independence. During her activities there, she met Muhammad Bondan, an Indonesian nationalist and secretary of the organization that lived in Australia as a political exile for his activism to make Indonesia become independent from the Dutch. Yeah. Bondan himself is actually a close friend of Indonesia's former Vice President Muhammad Hatta. Yeah. And then during the struggle, both Molly and Bondan assisted Sukarno's administration. Yeah. During the struggle, Molly and Bondan assisted Sukarno to gain Indonesia's independence until 1949. And after that, they both continued supporting Sukarno in the state building. You know, Indonesia was newly born, and it was Molly that helped Indonesia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs to build a stronger relationship with Australia and other part of of the world. You know, Molly only worked for Indonesia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs until 1968. That's like the end of the Sukarno era, and then Suharto came. Yeah. It seems Molly understood very well what's the the political circumstances at the time, which made him no longer active or helping the government. Yeah. So the stories were written in the book about her and Bondan. Yeah. And then from those historical foundations of the relationships, we've made both countries, Indonesia and Australia, we've made lots of policies that are actually strengthening our bilateral relationships. Since the Sukarno era, the Suharto era, and even after Suharto era, we've built cooperations on culture, education, arts, sports, and we have increased trade and investment between the two countries. And even Australia supported the Indonesia's annexation of East Timor in 1970s, it was controversial because many Australians also opposed to that idea. This is the dynamic of relationship. And also security cooperation since 1995 and still strong until today. And during the financial crisis in 1990s, Australia has been giving lots of aid to help to rebuild the country, to improve the economic situation at the time. And of course, the last one that we know is that Australia has been providing scholarships for Indonesians who want to study in Australia, and Indonesian governments also have providing scholarships. It's called Indonesian Art and Culture Scholarship for Australians or any other foreign students who want to study and learn in Indonesia. So we have these platforms that can actually help us to continue maintaining the relationship. Now, how do we see this relationship in the future? We have some opportunities and challenges. The opportunities throughout these years, throughout these decades, we have some platforms to build this relationship. Okay, the ones I mentioned here probably formal platforms such as Australia-Indonesia Institute, Australia-Indonesia Center, ACICIS, AIYA, and many others. All right. But there are other informal platforms that actually we rarely speak of, we rarely acknowledge, that actually helps to bind the relationship between the two countries. And actually, in my opinion, these informal relationships were actually the glue of the Australia-Indonesia relationship, what makes us strong with one another despite the changing dynamics throughout the times, especially in terms of social and political changes or political attitudes between the two countries that happen like ups and downs sometimes. So, for example, in Canberra, I've met some Indonesians who live there and married Australians, or Australians here in Indonesia who married Indonesians. They have distinctive views about events that occurred or happened between the two countries. When there was a conflict between Australia and Indonesia, it was actually these people who tried to give an explanation, a fair explanation. This is what Australia means. This is what Indonesia means. So misunderstandings between the two countries can be reduced by the active participations of these people, And then the challenges now that we're facing, unfortunately, and we started to feel it, is actually the economic crisis, which resulted in budget cuttings in every field that is related to Australia-Indonesia relationship. This is including the Australian universities that used to have Indonesian studies programs or Asian studies programs in general, which we have been facing a difficult time because of the minimum resources that we have, and then they have to cut the budget for, let's say, Asian studies, for Indonesian studies. And it's been felt in many countries, in many universities in Australia. Indonesian is studying Indonesia also complain. The last time was, especially since COVID pandemic, the crisis also implicated to other things, including the National Library of Australia, thinking of getting rid of their Asia collection. And this is a shame thing to know, because Indonesian collections of literatures in National Library of Australia is amongst the most complete one that I've ever known so far. And I did lots of research about for my thesis there for a few years, and it's amazing that National Library of Australia has this great collections of literatures which help not only me but many other people who study about Asia and Indonesia, and which helps many Australians to understand about the country and the regions better. So I don't know, this is probably something that we can discuss further about this. Yeah, probably I will end my talk here, and I would like to return the floor to Dio as the moderator. Hopefully we can discuss about these problems after Clarice. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Hikmawan, for the great speech. It was amazing, like, to know the other side of the relationship of Indonesia and Australia, which he mentioned before, like music and arts. And we, like the youths especially, are like, yeah, we can do things to, besides the government to government relations, to flourish this relationship. So then, yeah, as we also have Clarice here, so I may hand over the floor to Clarice. Thank you.
Thank you, Dio. Willajeng Sumping, everyone. Hopefully I said that right. I do actually work on occasion down in Bandung. As Dio said earlier, I'm based in Jakarta and I work for a state government from Australia on trade and investment stuff, mainly focusing on vocational education, so Sekolah Kejuruan. But part of that is actually on the relationship with West Java. So I'm very familiar with Bandung, and I'm really glad to be here to talk to AIYA Jawa Barat attendees and members and supporters. And if this is your first AIYA event that you have attended, it's really great to see that so many people are here. So I guess to give you a little bit of background, obviously today's topic is on how can millennials sort of shape the Australia-Indonesia relationship, and how, what are the initiatives that you can get involved in order to support the space, and are there working opportunities, study opportunities, those sorts of things. So I will just touch on a little bit of my own experience, because I know from both Indonesians and Australians, it's often sort of a mystery, how do you study international relations or, diplomacy or something like that, but how do you actually get involved in that, and how do you move to another country or do these sorts of exchange programs in order to broaden your knowledge and so that you gain expertise in that country. I started studying about Indonesian, luckily, when I was in junior high school, so SMP. Not a lot of Australians, I guess, study, or have the opportunity to continue studying a language that they learn at primary school or high school, because it's not a mandatory subject when you go into senior high school. For me, though, when I picked up Indonesian, of course, there was, the side of it that it was compulsory in junior high school, but not compulsory in senior high school. But I chose to continue because I really enjoyed the class. And I had the opportunity to go and study Indonesian actually in Malaysia for a little while. Some of you might be thinking that's a bit strange. Why did you study it in Malaysia? But there was a time in the Australia-Indonesia relationship where it was a little bit, I guess, rocky, in that there were several incidents between the countries. And some of you might remember things like the Bali bombings, the Jakarta embassy bombings. And that meant that travel in between Australia and Indonesia, especially for children and high school children, was not possible. So the next best opportunity for me was to go and study Bahasa Indonesia in Malaysia. And I'm very glad I did that because I actually lived with a family who was from Bandung, and they were working in Kuala Lumpur. And that was really my first opportunity to kind of experience, you know, if I'm studying Indonesian, why, you know, what is that going to lead to? You know, why, if I'm going to live in Australia and work in Australia, why would I study another language when everybody just speaks English? And I think sometimes it's the same for Indonesians. You learn English at high school or at university, but you might not get to use it in your workplace. So sort of, you know, you might use it online, but really sort of what's the point of it? Can you go and work overseas? But having that experience was really good because it kind of just showed, okay, well, maybe there are opportunities for me to continue my studies, and I'm really, you know, enjoying it, even if it's just for the sake of being able to eat rendang all the time, and, you know, experience all of these really cool things. So I went on to go to university, and I studied at Monash University actually with Evelyn. So that's where I met Evelyn for the first time. And Monash was really great because it obviously does have a Indonesian studies faculty. It is one of the few universities in Australia that does. But yeah, it's quite well known for its Indonesian studies, and it has a huge Indonesian library collection. So we touched on before the fact that the National Library of Australia has a big collection, but the Matheson Library actually is the largest collection of Indonesian texts outside of Australia. So those sorts of resources are, you know, incredible, and just to be able to have access to them for me when I was studying Indonesian was really invaluable because it gave me more insight into the history between Australia and Indonesia and the things that they had been working on in their sort of diplomatic relationship, but also at people-to-people levels. So, you know, there are things that aren't necessarily known sort of in the sort of public space that are hidden in these libraries, and you can go and read about them. And it was just amazing for me to sort of see that. And so that was another thing that really inspired me to continue my love for Indonesia and to continue studying it. So when I was at university, obviously you can study all you want about a particular country or a language or people, but if you don't meet those people from that country, you're probably not going to learn all that much. So I firstly went on a summer program to Yogyakarta, which was really great because that was another opportunity for me to sort of practice my language skills. Again, if I'm just sort of in Australia trying to practice my Indonesian and it's not really going anywhere, but if I start going to Indonesia and practicing with Indonesians, it helps a lot. So I came back and I was introduced to AIYA. There are obviously AIYA chapters across Australia and Indonesia. And yeah, it was just sort of good to sort of see, okay, I'm not sort of alone. I'm not, you know, one of the only people who's studying this. And there's interest from many other people. So to meet fellow Australians who are studying, as well as Indonesians living in Australia, was a really good opportunity. And I basically haven't left since. So now I've been involved in AIYA for around 6-7 years. And it's been, yeah, one of those great sort of organizations that's not particularly formal, but, you know, has a really broad range of events that can just get you involved in the space, even if you don't really have a background in it. So, you know, this is one sort of event that we might hold, but there could be like sporting events or music events. And even when I stepped up to become the AIYA Victoria chapter president back in 2015, the first event that I held was an Indonesian rap event, because there was an underground rap scene in Melbourne that just had a lot of Indonesians. And so we're like, okay, let's, you know, talk about this. So that was a really, you know, cool way to kind of find that there are sort of these informal partnerships and things, you know, projects that are going on in the space that people don't necessarily know about, but it's all part of this big relationship. Only if the things that we do sort of see in the media are, you know, government to government things, trade agreements, issues in the space. You know, that's not the only thing. So when I finished university, I was able to move to Indonesia almost straight away because I got another scholarship to study at UI. And so I continued my study of Indonesian. And through that, I did things like the Australia-Indonesia Youth Exchange Program. So I went to live in Bengkulu for a little while and just did lots of random things in Indonesia. And through that, I was able to then find employment here in Jakarta, and I've basically stayed here ever since. So that sort of just gives you a little bit of background that, you know, you might be doing these small things, but it eventually sort of leads to something else. So if you are sort of in the space and wondering, you know, what should I be doing, you know, keep doing what you're doing in terms of engaging with the other country, because that, you know, you never know sort of what that might lead to. But I kind of want to touch on a little bit about, you know, how do you find information about all of this sort of stuff? It is kind of hard if you're a university student to see what you might be doing in 5 years if you don't sort of have anything lined up, and how do I go and study? And I think obviously signing up to, you know, newsletters and stuff will only get you so far. But if you join community and get involved in organizations, that's something that can lead to you building a broader network. So if you're just sort of looking for opportunities on your own, that might lead to something, but you know, it's only one person who's looking for those opportunities. If you tell your friends and build community around finding opportunities, there tends to be more things that will come your way. So certainly having, you know, this group come together is a really good opportunity because it provides a space where people can say, yeah, I do want to, you know, do something from Bandung to engage with Australia, or I'm in Australia, how do I engage with Indonesia? How do I go to West Java? So that sort of stuff, you know, if we have this community here who can sort of share resources and information, that's always really good. So I think we've had a couple of people talk about how did they get a scholarship to study overseas, how did they find work, and all of that sort of stuff. The more you attend it, the more that you might be able to make, you know, new networks and that sort of thing. So yeah, you know, those are some of the things that I have, I guess, experienced in my Australia-Indonesia journey so far. And it's not always about what the government is doing, even though, you know, there are really cool initiatives out there. You know, we can talk about Indonesia-Australia Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, but that's sort of not relevant to us at the moment because it's not an agreement that's in place. But there will be things that come out of that that will be relevant to us. So say, for example, there are currently 1,000 work and holiday visas for Indonesians to study, to work and study in Australia. Once the agreement comes into play, that will increase to 4,100. And then I think from next year, it increases to 5,000. So those sorts of things will inevitably benefit people who are looking for opportunities to go to Australia. But the details of, you know, the trade agreement, it's kind of like not so relevant to people who are, you know, saying how do we create change? But taking up those opportunities will lead to other things about how you can involve yourself. And even if it's small, that's fine. So yeah, you know, those are things that I think people should be sort of looking into a little bit more. Tell your friends that you're looking for opportunities. Keep sort of your interests open and your eyes open about the things that you might want to study, the things you might want to work in, and see, you know, what that might lead to. Make sure that you're involved in organizations like AIYA. There's also things like the Conference of Australian and Indonesian Youth, the National Australia-Indonesia Language Awards, you know, Australia-Indonesia Youth Exchange Program, Dharma Siswa Scholarship. All of those sorts of things will allow you to sort of gain entry into the bilateral relationship, even if it's just, you know, at a grassroots level. And that's that's sort of the main thing. So Dio, maybe we can take some questions from the audience.
Okay, I might cover Dio for a bit because like he's have another thing to yeah, like a sudden thing. And right, so the question and answer session is open now for you guys if you have yeah, like questions related to the topic, or maybe you want to ask like specifically about how like experience of these two like amazing speakers we have, because Clarice as Australian living in Indonesia and experience the most of it, and Hikmawan as a speaker as well, Indonesian and originally from West Java, and experience the most of it in Australia with studying and also like living there. So now it's your turn to ask and to really, you know, like get into yeah, deep of what and how they're yeah, like be able to get the future collaborations going on, because yeah, this is our turn now. And yeah, I just want to highlight something in here, because we got like half of our participants from the Armidale English College. It's this school is a kind of like a small Australia in Bandung, or specifically in Soreang. That's one area in Bandung that is really how to say, like yeah, maybe not really like a Bandung city, but it's kind of like yeah, in the suburb. But we have this like a small community that really learn about Australian culture and language, and also yeah, doing all the you know, like this experience of how Australian doing like that. And yeah, I want to open the opportunity for you guys to ask the questions to Clarice or to Hikmawan. So please don't be shy. Kalau ada yang masih ragu dalam berbahasa Inggris, tidak apa, silahkan bertanya dalam bahasa Indonesia juga boleh. Silahkan.
If it's easy question, give it to me. If it's difficult question, give it to Clarice.
Give it to Clarice.
Or Dio.
Okay, Pam.
Sorry, I was. Oh, there's Nabila. Raise her hand. You can unmute yourself, maybe.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Hello, I'm Nabila.
Hello, Nabila.
Hi.
Actually, I still get confused. I mean, I am still undergraduate student, right? And I'm so confused. What can I do for the future collaboration between Indonesia and Australia? It's like that.
What university do you go to?
What university?
In Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, UPI.
Okay.
UPI, Pendidikan
Yes.
Indonesia. Yeah.
Well,
okay.
So
that's
maybe
a difficult question. It goes to Clarice, it seems.
who want to answer first?
Yeah, I'll have a go at answering it first.
All right.
So what can you do? Yeah, so you're studying at the moment, and you're asking what can you do in order to kind of have influence in the bilateral relationship. I would say, you know, continue. Are you studying anything about Australia in particular, or you're just sort of interested and you've joined, you know, AIYA before, or?
I'm just interested of it.
Just interested, yeah. And that's a really great place to start. So I think, you know, to further your involvement, you should consider doing some, you know, research about what has Indonesia and Australia done together before? What are the things that we collaborate on? You know, whether it's at a country-to-country level or a person-to-person level. Certainly, if you're in West Java, you can always get involved with AIYA in Jawa Barat, because there are a lot of people who have been involved in our committees who they've never really been to Australia, or they've never had any connection to Australia before, but it is a great opportunity to meet a lot of people who have been there before. I think there are many students who receive, say, Australia Award scholarships who even a year before they received their Australia Award scholarship had never thought that they would have the opportunity to go and study in Australia. But they found out, whether through word of mouth or they saw an advertisement for it, you know, that they could apply for something like that. And they just had a go at it, and they connected with people who had some connection. So I think if you're an undergraduate and you don't have a lot of experience with Australia, that would probably be the first place to start, because from that you don't sort of know where that might lead to. I'm not sure if you want to add a comment as well.
I'd like to add what Clarice said. It is true that you can start researching about Australia and all that, especially if you're planning to study in Australia. But here, what I can tell you, Nabila, is that by you joining this forum, this online webinar, you actually already started a part of this building this bilateral relationship. You know, without your presence here, we wouldn't probably share much about what we've been doing in the last 70 or probably hundreds of years. And like I said before, that building a relationship between the two nations is not necessarily an exclusive right of diplomats or trained diplomats to do that. So everyday people like you and me and Clarice and everyone else here in the forum, it actually matters in building the relationship. So if I'm not mistaken, I haven't joined AIYA's programs for many years. Yeah, it's been quite a while. But as far as I know, AIYA has been providing a platform where you can learn much about Australia, and Australians can learn much about Indonesia through language exchanges, and it is just a great platform. When I finished my master's degree at NU in 2010, I think between 2008 to 2010, I was involved in a similar platform. It's called Indonesia Australia Language Exchange Program, and then disingkat become SELAI, dibaca di belakang gitu ya. And we did a similar thing, and it's just an amazing platform for Australians to learn Indonesians and Indonesian culture, and for Indonesians to also learn about Australian culture as well and practice their English, of course. And when I got home to Bandung, I was actually dreaming to someday that we have such a platform in Bandung, but there wasn't. AIYA wasn't there before. And I think Yogyakarta, Jakarta, and also Salatiga is more advanced than Bandung in terms of having this type of platform, because most Australian students studying about Indonesia, they just go to the universities there, like Satyawacana University and the UGM or Jakarta in UI. Bandung is an amazing city, but no one's interested to study here. This is like so unfair, right? But then here comes AIYA West Java chapter, and I was like, thank God, finally, because as far as I know, when I was studying in Australia, there are so many people from West Java. So I was wondering why none of us actually starting this initiative. Why didn't I? So so I thank AIYA's members for building this bridge. And you, Nabila, by joining this webinar, is actually a part of that as well. So AIYA will have like different topics to discuss, to share, and then like Clarice said, you will never know where it's gonna lead you to. So,
and I just add on to that as well. So yeah, I think you're right in that the main places that Australians at least think of studying when they come to Indonesia is Yogyakarta or Jakarta, or they holiday in Bali. And for most people, 95% of people, that's the extent of it. They don't really go to many other places in Indonesia because either they don't know about it or they're misinformed. They might think that they don't want to go to the western part of Indonesia because, it's not as beautiful as eastern Indonesia or something silly like that. But now there is increasingly lots of collaborations at many, many levels between the two countries. And for West Java specifically, I know that, I've been working on a project with Ridwan Kamil for Victoria and West Java to sort of take it to a stage of sister state relations, and you would have seen that Ridwan came down to Melbourne a couple of weeks ago, you know, in order to make sure that there were opportunities for people from Bandung to travel to Australia and seek opportunities in Australia, and for people in Australia to go and seek opportunities in Bandung, because Bandung is a really cool place. And there should be more collaboration between all of the universities and on these really special projects. So hopefully we will see some more stuff about Bandung, at least in Australia, so that it sort of increases the, you know, Australians' awareness of things that are happening in West Java, because West Java is a cool place.
It's interesting. I think, yeah, based on like the stories you both have told before, like this kind of initiative is like what makes you entrance to this like Australia-Indonesian relationship, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Nabila, for the question. And now we have Bayan. He's the only Australian in this forum, after Clarice, maybe.
Maybe the only Australian in Australia currently.
Yeah.
So thank you both so much. It's been a very fascinating and insightful discussion, and sharing your experiences as well. We've talked a lot about, you know, the role of education and research, trade and economics, national security, defence and collaboration on those levels, and also with people-to-people connections and the youth and cultural things. I think we've discussed that a lot, and we've got some great ideas on how we can contribute in those ways. I was going to ask more specifically, what can we as youth be doing to promote human rights in both countries across the space, and especially in terms of Indigenous rights, religious minorities, and the role of women in society in both Australia and Indonesia? Thank you.
Awesome question, Bayan. So maybe who want to start? Indra?
Again, that's a difficult question. Clarice would probably want to answer the question.
I'm happy to take that one as the honor to start off with. No, that's a really great question, Bayan. So, you know, there's one side of it where, of course, we have to acknowledge the sensitivities between Australia and Indonesia, and at a government-to-government level, they have certain things they talk about and certain things that they don't talk about. But at a people-to-people level, you know, we can talk about anything. And I think women's rights, LGBT rights, Indigenous rights, these are things that really are interesting topics that people do want to talk about, but sometimes they're like, oh, I don't know how appropriate it is. Using whether it's your personal platform or writing articles about your perspectives on Australia and Indonesia, you know, in those sorts of sectors, at least I personally would definitely encourage. Now we have in Australia across this weekend, you know, nationwide demonstrations around the Black Lives Matter movement, and that's bringing a lot of focus onto, I guess, Indigenous rights in Australia, but then also in Indonesia, equally with issues between you know, Papua and Indonesia. So highlighting and having conversations with your friends in the space. You know, I've been having a lot of conversations with my friends about, because they're asking me questions like, oh, I didn't really know anything about Indigenous Australians. You know, when I went to Melbourne, this was my experience, but I didn't really do much about, you know, knowing much about Indigenous rights in Australia. And equally for my Australian friends who have come to Indonesia, they don't know a lot about things that have been going on in Indonesia. So having those open conversations, I think, is always like a good way to start. Writing about it, talking about it, you know, highlighting, you know, what your perspective is. I think, you know, one of the things that I learned about Indonesia when I first came to Indonesia was that, you know, while at a societal level, Indonesia doesn't really want to address LGBT rights, but at a person-to-person level, you know, people don't really care that much. But of course, it really sort of depends what your background is. I was amazed to go to like see waria in Jogja, just sort of on the streets, because my perception before I came to Indonesia was that, you know, it wasn't a very LGBT-friendly country. But then when I came to Jogja, I was like, oh, wow, you know, this is not sort of what I learned about Indonesia in a sort of by reading articles about Indonesia. So having those conversations, I think, is always a good place to start, and having the community like this to be able to talk about these issues is probably how we can begin, you know, to see changes sort of at an institutional level, at a government level, because Australia and Indonesia should be talking about these things and collaborating more on how they can address this properly. That's probably a really broad answer though.
Great, no, thank you, very insightful, thank you.
Yeah, I would like to add, probably, I don't know if it's answered or not, but this is my opinion of it. Yeah, I'm always concerned about human rights in not only Indonesia, but also in Australia and other parts of the world. I think in terms of building the relationship between the two countries, the human rights agenda can be part of it as well. But here's something to note and very important to probably discuss here is that in some people here in Indonesia, the term human rights or HAM is a little bit, it has a negative connotation. It is sometimes equated by them as, you know, it's like a colonial concept, you know, which where you know, foreign countries try to dictate Indonesia on what to do, what is ethical and non-ethical, and all that. You know, I always meet those people a lot because, you know, I used to live in a very conservative environment. And just to let you know, even though I was an underground rock musician, I was also a santri, a student in madrasah in Garut. So we have these Islamist narratives circulating around, not necessarily inside their own Islamist organizations, but also just across Muslim public space. You know, some teachers just what do you call it? Taught a wrong thing or told the wrong thing about what human right is to the people. And in the end, they just have fallen into this kind of, what do you call it, a conspiracy theory that human rights is an attempt of foreign countries to control, how our world should work and all that. You know. But I don't think like that. So I think we all have to concern with human rights in all levels. All humans matters, and every right of people to live, to express themselves, to think, have to be defended. And one of the reasons why I joined the protest against Suharto in late 1990s was also my concerns of human rights. And even now still, I still have concerns of human rights. When people are busy or protesting about the Black Lives Matter, I've already have that concern since many years ago. Being in the underground music community, we have this value of anti-racism or non-racism, and it has been embedded quite strongly among the communities that we don't differentiate our community members by the color of their skin, by their race. So we all just respect with one another. In Australia, during my study as well, I always supported the Indigenous Australians' various cultural programs, and I would like to know more about them. And unfortunately, this is the sad thing, okay? Let me say it bluntly, that almost all Indonesians who study in Australia that I know, they are rarely engaged with the Indigenous Australians. I don't know why. And the sad thing is that I found like a friend, Indonesian friend, who was unintentionally said thing which I consider racist, and this racism was addressed towards the local Indigenous Australians. And I just assumed since then it's just like this is the ketidaktahuan dia, about the problems here in Australia, racism here in Australia, and all that. Apart from that, I also engaged in the, I don't know, should I tell you this about or not, but me and my supervisor, we joined protests a few times in Perth in support of the Palestinians' rights for freedom. So now it's like, you know, I got the scholarship from the Australian government, and I know Australian government's in conflict with, you know, my political orientation in terms of Palestinian issues. So, but you know, what the heck, you know, this is what I believe. I think when we defended someone's, a society's human rights issue, then we have to defend it, you know, the similar problem elsewhere. So that's all.
I think that's a great point, actually, in that if you're in Australia, at least you are obviously allowed to protest. So you as an international student, of course, you can attend a protest. But I mentioned before, you know, bearing in mind sensitivities between Australia and Indonesia, one issue for if you're an Australian student in Indonesia is that if you do attend a protest, it actually violates your visa regulations. So if that is a way that you want to express your particular opinion on a cause in Indonesia, I would just say be cautious with that sort of stuff, because there have been cases of Australians being sent home from Indonesia for participating in those sorts of things. And that is an issue for sure, but it's just something to be cautious of if you find yourself in that situation in Indonesia.
Amazing response for both speakers. Maybe Bayan, you want to respond on that?
Yeah.
I just want to say, yeah, thank you both so much. I think it was really honest and really informative responses from both of you. I guess the takeaway was, you know, we must respect the law of the country that we are in. But in saying that, there are issues that we shouldn't be shy to educate and also just discuss and engage in the discourse with our peers and our friends and other things, and stand up for what we believe in. So, yeah, as long as it's within the constraints of the law. That's really important.
You know, there's if I may add that before I forgot, you know, it is a good thing to do for us actually to try to solve the problems we have here, including human rights issues. But it is also important to note that sometimes it's uneasy to do that in the current situation. As you probably already know, you know, the political climate here at the moment is a bit, yeah, it's a bit unfriendly. So I know very well that many Australians have been supporting, let's say, the Free West Papua movement, and we all know that some of them just ended badly. They have to be deported or arrested by the authorities. So yeah, it's just something important thing to discuss, but also have to be careful with that. You know, I personally no problem, but I just worry with
definitely, yeah,
yeah,
exercising that
yeah, yeah, just worry
tact and that wisdom
yeah,
in who we're engaging in these discussions with, keeping that those
yeah,
considerations in mind for sure. Yeah.
yeah. I think about 4 years ago, there was also an AIYA participant. Her name's Susan. She was from Australia. Well, she's originally from Netherlands, but she studied in Australia, and she was an activist. And she joined the, I think she joined ACICIS or something. So she studied at Unpar the other day, and she's also Tom's friend. Yeah, what I know about her is that she was doing research about the farmers of palm plantations in North Sumatra. Yeah, and she had to deal with, you know, pemuda Pancasila premans, and I was like, you're a foreigner and you're studying this shit and coming to the, you know, basically, you know, the lion's den. You know, how are you gonna deal with that? How are you gonna do with it? I was actually worried as a friend that she might, you know, be ended up arrested or worse, killed or murdered, something like that. So, but she did well. Apparently, she made friends with some of the Pemuda Pancasila gang. So there you go.
happy ending in a tough situation.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean, you always, there are, I think, at least Indonesians, you know, Australians who study Indonesia, people do acknowledge that there are very sensitive topics that political parties have interest in, certain majority groups have interest in, that is tough for us to get involved in. But if you understand that and you are sensitive around addressing those things in a respectful way, there's always conversations that can be had.
Yeah.
Awesome both. Wow, it's quite tense conversation, yeah, for us.
Yeah, I'm sure there are Indonesians who are sort of listening to this who joined this and said, I didn't think that we would even mention Free West Papua, but you know.
Sorry about that. I didn't mean to. It's just an example. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. But
And I
anyway,
guess like just the last thing, I mean, it goes both
okay,
ways.
okay.
It's not just about
Yeah.
Australians in Indonesia, but also, you know, like with Indigenous rights back home,
Absolutely.
Indonesians who come in, they probably feel quite similar. Like they want to have their voice and provide their opinions on this discussion or discourse, but they also need to like keep in mind how that's perceived, and it might be difficult to do so. So it goes both ways for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, true. I think,
Agree.
just to edit, I think if you want to voice your idea, just like do it cautiously, and everything is on your, how to say, like your responsibility, right? So maybe if anyone want to ask or respond with this topic, feel free to raise your hand. And it's like both speakers can speak Bahasa Indonesia, so and I see only one Australian living in Australia right now, so just feel free.
Yeah, guys, kalau ada pertanyaan, silakan.
Ariel, okay, please.
Yeah. Ariel.
Okay.
Hi there.
Hello.
Hello.
So I'm Ariel, and I'm studying at Parahyangan Catholic University. I just want to say, I've noticed that both of you talked about how influential music is in everyday diplomacy. And I found that to be really interesting because some time ago, we were actually planning on organizing a public discussion about music as a tool for diplomacy that sadly had to be canceled because of the pandemic. So, I was wondering, is it okay if you guys elaborate more on how you guys personally think music can be used as a tool for diplomacy, or like at least like how music has impacted both of your stories? Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Ariel. Maybe who want to start?
Okay, that sounds like a difficult question again. So maybe Clarice want to answer the question.
Ladies first, okay.
I'll just always go first. I think music for sure is something that influences the relationship. I know the Australian Embassy has, on a couple of occasions, you know, they have a social diplomacy section in the embassy, and they've held some music events before. But there are, you know, good examples of Australian and Indonesian musical collaborations. There was some Indigenous Australian musicians who traveled to Indonesia to do some collaboration with artists from Indonesia, and they all went back to Australia, and they sort of, you know, created this, you know, this music that they released and that sort of thing. I think the Temper Trap, there's like an Indonesian artist who's a member of the band, and everybody else is Australian, and all of that sort of thing. So there are examples of some bands who have gotten together, and some collaborations that have happened. I think it's probably not discussed enough because you probably often feel like, oh, I need to be sort of involved in the music scene, you know, how do I talk about it? But whenever I've come across it, it's just that I've, you know, met a random person and they're like, oh yeah, I'm an Indonesian musician and I'm living in Australia. And I'm like, oh, you know, how's it going for you? You know, and from that, you know, we've been able to sort of create these other events focusing on music. And again, yeah, a lot of Australian musicians who have done exchange semesters or whatever in Indonesia, they've found inspiration from their time in Indonesia, because I think overall Indonesia is a pretty musical like culture. Like across Indonesia, there hasn't been really a time where I haven't learned something new about a particular instrument or something that comes from a province in Indonesia, or how that sort of affects the community and that sort of thing. When I was living in Melbourne, I was in a dance group actually with Everland. We did a lot of traditional Indonesian dancing. But of course, a big part of that is music, and making sure that there's someone who can play the gendang and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. And And for me, because I was coming into that as a foreigner and I didn't really know a lot about it, that influenced me greatly, because it was sort of like, oh, this is another way that I can get involved. And of course, if music's not your thing, it doesn't have to be music that connects you to Indonesia or Australia. Sport is a big one as well. There's AFL groups that involve both, players from both countries, futsal, badminton, basketball, you name it. There's all kinds of things that connect people. Art as well, if you're into art, dancing. It's just like there's a range of things that can connect people. So if you do have ideas for music, find some fellow music lovers and definitely talk about it.
Thank you, Clarice. It's amazing. Maybe Hikmawan, Indra, want to add?
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Music is a practice of international relations. I may be only a few of the IR scholars that says this, but no one deny that in the practice of diplomacy and international relations in general, music played a significant role. When we speak about music, it's not necessarily traditional music that actually attracts people to learn about someone's culture. Especially, this is an example that we can use, especially when we can see my experience when I was studying at NU in Canberra back in 2008 to 2010, is that surprisingly still the same case until today, that the Indonesian government has been promoting Indonesian culture and music, but within the framework of traditional culture and music, like ethnic and all that, which created a perception among Australians who never been to Indonesia or never know Indonesia that much, that Indonesia is actually not a developing country. It's like a traditional country. And that's true. Every time I join Indonesian culture programs, I always play angklung. I always dance the pencak silat thing. It seems everything ethnic about Indonesia, but Indonesia is actually more general than that. We're actually also a modern country, and we have modern music to share. And in fact, that beyond people's knowledge, that underground rock bands, Indonesian underground rock bands, has been touring across Australia for many years. And also Australian rock band has been touring Indonesia for many years. And this is the underground network, the underground music network that facilitated this. This is the people-to-people relations kind of diplomacy, where they don't care much about formality. They just want to play music, making friends, and get to know each other, and that's it. And many Indonesians don't know that actually these Indonesian artists who's been touring overseas, including Australia, actually, if we define successfulness from this way, is that they traveled overseas more than Chris Dayanti or Anang, which Chris Dayanti once toured overseas, but she sang in a hotel lobby, something like that. I'm not saying that performing in hotel lobby is a bad thing, but Indonesian musicians that I know who came to Perth in Canberra, they perform really well, really good, and they're well appreciated by the local audience in Australia. When I was in Perth during my PhD study, there were at least like 3 to 4 Indonesian musicians performing there. They're not well known in the mainstream society in Indonesia, but they're quite well known in the underground community. Amongst them was Ichan Harim. Ichan Harim has been performing in Australia for many times and have been engaged in the community, in the subcultural community there in Perth, in Sydney, in Melbourne. And him himself, he's an artist. He's originally from West Java, and he was a santri too, but ended up as a metalhead. And he now lived in Bali, have his own distro business, clothing business, and he's been in and out Australia. And this is like an example of how the people-to-people relations actually, beyond the formal mechanism, beyond the formal framework, has been working really well through music. Yeah, and I found that Ichan also made some relationships with local Australians there in Perth. So like the level of relationships has been like, very broad, and we didn't know much about it until we are there. And also there's a metal band called, I forgot what's the name of the band. They're from Bali, and they're all lecturers. And I forgot what's the name, but the lyric is just so dirty. And I was like, dude, you're all lecturers, and your lyrics about, you know, about penis, about vaginas, about sex. Like, why? this is a Isn't it like a better presentations of Indonesia into the Australian audience? No, they said, not really. It's because we are bored with our formal life in universities. You know, we're teaching, researching, and all that. We just like to express this way. And then, yeah. So, yeah, exactly. Music is a strong template for diplomacy, especially people-to-people relations.
A fun fact I learned today actually was that Afghan studied at Monash.
Ah, there you
wow.
go.
So I was like, wow, that's another, you know, thing we can include in our trivia about music connections between Australia and Indonesia.
Yeah, and adding to that, there is like also Dylan, or we call like the famous Dylan Iqbal is also studying at Monash right now. So yeah, you must be like doing something like exploring Australian culture as well. So yeah, just hoping for more collaboration on that.
Maybe she's not musician. Najwa Shihab also studied in Monash. I think I met her when I went to.
She did.
Yeah. So, yeah. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for the response for both speakers. Maybe Ariel, you want to respond on that?
No thanks. I'm already very happy with their answers, so thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariel. Wow, it's been amazing. We talk a lot about music and stuff, and yeah, it's true that I think I know Pops, the band from Bali that you mentioned before.
I remember.
I know.
Yeah, sweet name, but yeah, very dirty.
yeah. Maybe anyone want to respond or have a question?
Questions?
Feel free to. Yeah, I think it's been great. You know, like not many forum talk about like focusing on music as a tool for diplomacy. And as I also been around the circle in music scene in Bandung, so I also realized how, I mean, I didn't realize back then, but now I realize like, oh wow, like yeah, I made some connection also before from the music scene, right? Yeah. And yeah, Indra also introduced me to a lot of like musician or yeah, people from Australia here, they're touring or something, you know. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's another example of again, people sort of think the only way that you might be able to get involved in the space is if it's through working for the embassy or for Kemlu, and it's very formal and you know, talking about trade and investment and diplomacy, but filmmakers and musicians and artists and, you know, theatre performers, they all equally play as much of a role as those people. So it's a crucial part of the relationship, because if you can imagine in Indonesia or in Australia without, you know, art and culture, like for me, I can't imagine that.
Yeah.
True. I actually curious about this topic, more about this. Like as we know, like Indonesia use a lot of traditional arts to introduce ourselves in Australia, especially. And what do you guys think? Like, I mean, Indonesia have a lot of contemporary arts to talk about, and yeah, like how you responded to it, like how can we voicing more about the contemporary art?
Do you want me to take that one again?
if you mind, and then okay, I'll take that first.
Let's force Indra.
Okay, I feel sorry for Clarice for answering the first the whole time. Okay, yeah, like I said before, like we have amazing traditional art and culture, and to say it bluntly and honestly, even though these traditional art and cultures are amazing, they are they are less appreciated by our own people. Unfortunately, only few among the societies nowadays are really engaging in the traditional arts and cultural performances. Only few of people coming to Indonesian theaters. I didn't like theaters usually, and I was like, why it's so boring? What's the meaning of this dialogue that people do in the stage? But since I started my relationship with my ex-girlfriend, who become my wife now, she likes to go to theaters in Canberra. So whether I like it or not, I just go to the theaters and started enjoying it. And I was like, why I did not appreciate my own theatrical performances. So I tried to attend the local theater performances sometimes, but not many. To be honest, not many good theater performances around here. Yes, traditional arts and cultures are very important, but we also have to see, other parts of other types of Indonesian cultures and art platforms. Like I said before, we are actually a modern country too, like Australia, and we have a range of music, arts products that we can share with others, especially in Australia. um like I said, what kind of disappointed me is that the Indonesian embassies, because I used to help people at the embassy when I was in Canberra to organize some cultural events. Sometimes they narrow the perception of Indonesian culture to the Australian audiences as something traditional only. Angklung, what else? There are many others, Chalung and all that. When we actually have other types of arts and cultural productions, including jazz, pop, and all that. And it just, I think in that sense, the embassies, Indonesian embassies, just want to sell Indonesian culture so people would come from Australia, come to Indonesia to see the traditional parts of Indonesia, which I think it's a little bit, sorry if I'm being critical, but to be honest, it's sometimes over exaggerated, because the traditional practices in our country is less appreciated, not only by the people, but also by the bureaucrats that are working in the Ministry of Culture, for instance. And that's not something to be hidden from us, because it's very obvious. Eka Kurniawan, for instance, the novelist from Indonesia, he decided to deny or reject the award from the government, because Eka Kurniawan thought that the Indonesian government hasn't been much supportive of Indonesian artists the whole time, and cultural programs as well. So in response to as an example of his criticism, and then he decided not to accept the award until the Indonesian government changed their attitude and all that. So actually, it's just an example of how our appreciation has to be moved beyond something that is formalized by the government. But doesn't mean that we oppose the government's efforts, but we just have to add something about it, and giving more like inputs to the government to expand their diplomatic programs to other countries, especially Australia, that Indonesia is broader than what they've been shaping the whole time. Let alone the traditional art and culture. Many Australians still couldn't understand about, let's say, Islam and Muslims. And many Australians still could not differentiate between Islamism and Islam. I've made a conversations with a guy in Canberra. He's a banker. He's a rich man. He's a rich white guy, and he didn't know that I'm a Muslim. So he talked about Muslims in Indonesia, and he did a bad thing about Muslims going to mosque and all that, as if like we're terrorists and all that. And I was like, is that true? I didn't tell him that I was a Muslim, yeah, and but it shows that he's a nice guy. don't take me wrong, he's a nice guy. It just many Australians still don't know about Muslims and Islam, and that's what they perceived us about Muslims, including in Indonesia. Still relatively bad and all that. Only few Australians usually that have educations and learn more about Indonesia and Muslim culture, that not all Muslims the same, not all Muslims just like ISIS, something like that. But yeah, it's a challenge for our future diplomacy to introduce who are Indonesians, what our Indonesian cultures are. Same thing with Australia, to introduce Australian culture to Indonesian audience. It's not only about koala and kangaroos or desert. It's far more advanced than that.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah, I think
it's a long way.
It's always a tricky one, because both Australia and Indonesia are very big countries. Like people don't realize how big Indonesia is, and they don't realize how big Australia is. And sometimes in these programs or initiatives that embassies or consulates or universities or cultural institutions put on, they do sort of have to funnel Indonesia in its broad sense into one sort of thing, and they think angklung, gamelan, pencaksilat, saman, and they're the four, they're the things that they sort of focus on, and then they say, if you join this initiative, you get a free ticket to Bali, if you win this.
That is so true.
And that's kind of like the extent of it, and it's not helped by a lot of the media, at least in Australia, about Indonesia or other parts of Indonesia that's not really Bali. Demonstrations in Jakarta around FPI staff and those sorts of images, do get put on mainstream television, and then Australians are sitting in their homes and they're going, oh my God, what is this stuff happening in Jakarta? For example, my parents have never been to Indonesia, even though I've lived in Indonesia for 3 years. And my mum said to me once, so if I visit you in Jakarta, do I have to wear a hijab? And I went, am I wearing a hijab? So it was a bit of a confusing moment for me. So I think, there is a lot of room for Australians, at least, and people all around the world, to be educated about all of the really cool contemporary things that are going on in Indonesia, whilst balancing the sort of traditional aspects of Indonesia, which are very unique to Indonesia. It's amazing for me to be able to go to these very historic places in Indonesia, Borobudur and Prambanan, and see, these rainforests that have been around for thousands, if not millions of years, these amazing parts of Indonesia that a lot of the time Indonesians kind of go, oh, well, so what, we have Borobudur. It's a temple. It's not even part of my religion, so I don't really care about it. But that's all things that are very, very interesting and unique to Indonesia. So it's definitely worth highlighting. But, people like Rich Brian and Agnes Mo, they're famous overseas. I mean, they're famous in Indonesia, but they've gone overseas because they know that there's not enough initiatives that can support them as artists in Indonesia. And that's a shame, because, even though Indonesia is very proud of these artists, it's crucial for Indonesia to be able to back that up. You don't want to see your best and brightest go overseas because they can't get paid enough and they don't have enough of a platform, or they're sort of compared to these other traditional artists, and it's sort of like, oh well, we're going to do the gamelan thing this year again because we know that's what foreigners like. We don't think that they like rap music, or you're not as famous as other rappers from, say, the United States. So, there's a lot of room to move there. And I think also, Australian universities can do a lot in changing those perceptions as well, because at the end of the day, they're kind of running these language programs and stuff, but of course they're restricted by their budgets. It's a real shame for me to hear recently, I think Flinders University will be closing its Indonesian Studies department because of funding constraints and things like that. So, there's a whole range of issues at play here, but it's certainly the case of, don't think of Indonesia in that it's just about gamelan. It's way bigger than that. And don't think about Australia in that it's, a desert full of kangaroos. It's also a very big country. There's lots and lots of things going on. So, you know, finding a way to kind of explain these different initiatives that are happening is really, really crucial in order for people to better understand each other's country.
Awesome. There is a comment from Bayan. He said, "I'm a Flinders student and I didn't know about this."
Yeah, well,
so Bayan.
Yeah, this is from our AIYA South Australia committee. They normally do sort of, I guess, recruitment for the committee out of Flinders, and I think Flinders acts as a sort of, if students from other universities want to study in South Australia, they study through Flinders.
There's a cross-institutional agreement. We're the only university in South Australia with an Indonesian course and things, so that's really upsetting news. It's actually really sad. It's quite hypocritical from me because I am a Flinders student, but I'm starting an Indonesian degree next semester, but with the University of New England online, but with Flinders. Yeah, but I thought it was interesting because
I think the issue was, obviously there's been some sort of funding constraint, and if you're studying Indonesian at Flinders University, you can continue it until the end of your degree, but if you want to start, they've basically told people that they won't be funded anymore. But I'm trying to find some concrete announcements from the university to sort of back this up. But that's what our AIYA South Australia guys have let us know over the last week or so, and it's pretty sad actually.
That's really sad, and I think it you both mentioned earlier how the humanities, Asian studies, Mas Hikmawan was mentioning, you know, these types of disciplines are the hardest hit. I think you touched on it as well, Clarice. And I guess languages and cultural studies are also not immune from that. So it's really upsetting that, I guess because of Corona and reducing enrolments across all Australian universities, it's led to that. But I'll try my best to get our voice out there to try and keep that going. But yeah, that's really bad news. Thanks for letting me know.
Yeah, for sure. And you also made a comment about confusing Islam and Arab culture as well. Like 100%, a lot of Australians have complete misconceptions around what is Islam and, you know, what does that even mean? Like they just have this image in their mind about conflict in the Middle East and, you know, all of that sort of stuff. And at least in my experience with Indonesia, it's been an extremely positive one, you know, in learning about Islam, and most of my friends are Indonesian and subsequently Muslim. My partner as well, he's Sundanese and Muslim, and when I introduced him to some of my extended family, they had a similar thing of talking about Indonesia and Islam, and they didn't realize that he was Muslim, and I was like, well, actually. So those sorts of things are always pretty interesting.
Yeah, I guess like even for me, like I'm of Iranian background, albeit non-Muslim, but before living in Indonesia, I guess because of what my family had experienced by individuals acting in the name of Islam, it formed like sort of this negative perception in my mind. But then when I actually came to Indonesia, I realized that the typical Muslim is actually very peaceful and normal and actually shares so much in common with myself as well. So I really think it's through that actual, and you guys mentioned it, that actual experience that we can dispel these misunderstandings and also build greater understanding. And that's so important to challenge prejudices and misconceptions for sure.
Yeah.
Awesome, Bayan. Thank you for your response on that. Awesome. Evelyn, maybe we have more questions or not?
Yep. All right.
Heriska.
So, Heriska. Yeah. I think Heriska is one of the students of Papa.
Yeah. No, okay. Thank you for the. Yeah, my name is Heriska. I'm a Bachelor of International Relations, Universitas Pajajaran. And I think Indonesia and Australia government relations is like a love and hate relationship back then, because there was tensions like the Bali 9 tragedy, espionage issue,
Yeah.
drugs crime, or travel ban. And for that, I would like to ask about how do you think the Indonesian and Australian youth can ease the tension between both countries? Like, what can the youth do?
Yeah,
That's all. Thank you so much.
yeah. Thank you so much for your question. It's a really good point. I think the key thing to note is that even if there are tensions at a government to government level, people always maintain relationships. So if there is ever an incident between Australia and Indonesia, and it's sort of affecting, news about both countries' cooperation together in a negative way, if you have Australian or Indonesian friends, they're still your friends. They never go away, really. So what young people can do is to sort of, maintain that connection to their community and maintain their interest in the other country. Just because there are issues around live cattle exports to Indonesia from Australia doesn't mean that suddenly your Australian friends stop talking to you. It's, if anything, a reason for you guys to talk more about things that are happening in the space. So yeah, the thing that you can do as a young person is just maintain your interests and maintain your relationships that you have. And, all at the end of the day, all of these diplomatic issues, they always blow over, always.
Yeah. Yeah, relationship is organic. It's always changing. Depends to the social, political, and economic conditions. And since these aspects will be changing the whole time, and then our relationship will be, depending on that, we'll be adapting to that. But like I said before, every time there's a tension between Australia and Indonesia regarding some issues like the espionage and all that, there's always people like us who have maintained the relationship beyond the formal mechanisms, of course. Especially if you're in Australia, you will meet like a mixed family of Indonesians marrying Australians, or Indonesia, Australians marrying Indonesians and live there. There's always this alternative voice which can actually reduce the tension beyond the formal situation. Okay, maybe if you see it on the news, it seems that Australia and Indonesia is going to be in a war, let's say, for example. But with these voices at the grassroots level, actually these people are actually providing alternative voice that actually could reduce the tensions. A voice that build an understanding of the situation. That's why I mentioned an example of underground music performances as an analogy of this relationship. That if we believe that the relationship should be formalized, and then every time there's a problem between the formal institutions, and then we will see that the relationship is just broken. But if we acknowledge that these relationships also beyond formal mechanism and formal framework, and there are many other actors in this relationship that actually matters to build the relationship between the two countries, it actually it could be like an alternative to see that yes, the relationship might be bad from the top, but actually below we can do something to make it right. Yeah, that's why I always call my students to be see every issue from both levels, from the formal framework and also informal framework. Yeah, in many years of my experience of engaging with my Australian mates and those who married with Indonesians, I've never seen any unproductive view or voices from them when it comes to a conflict between the two countries. I don't know, maybe you can use an example of Indonesia and Malaysia relationship as well. It seems if we see it from the news, Indonesia and Malaysia is just two countries in a bad relationship, but it's not really like that. So yeah, that's all.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
It's been amazing session. Maybe but the time is almost over, so I might let Karina Putri, maybe. She said she want to ask a question.
Yeah. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Well, my name is Karina. I'm just really curious. I'm about to address the questions to foreigners students. I'm curious about how do you handle the culture shock and culture gap between Australia and Indonesia? Because of course, when the first time you came here, it's not easy peasy for you to handle the culture shock. The culture shock. Sorry. Thank you.
Yes, that is a great question. I think it goes both ways. It's not just Australians who have culture shock when they come to Indonesia. It's definitely also Indonesians have culture shock when they come to Australia. I think there are a couple of things. For me, I'm not a fussy eater, and I'm not sort of like, oh, I don't want to try new things. So for me, kind of acclimatizing to Indonesian food was relatively easy, but I have had experiences of friends and say when my sister came to Indonesia, that was sort of something for them that they found a little bit hard because you can't get certain things in Indonesia that you're accustomed to in Australia, like bread and milk and cheese. You know, they're sort of staple food for a lot of people in Australia, but it's very hard to find in Indonesia. But overall, I find Indonesian food really yummy. It's really delicious. And a lot of Australians are sort of familiar with the sort of flavors because there are a lot of Asian Australians and so spicy food and rice and things like that we kind of, or at least in my generation, we have sort of grown up with. Might be a little bit different from my parents' generation. But yeah, so for those sorts of things, I found relatively easy. Of course, the first time you go to the toilet in Indonesia, if you're from Australia and you realize that there's no toilet paper and it's just a semprotan or something, that might be a bit of a shock. And I think equally for Indonesians, when you come to Australia and you realize there's only toilet paper and no semprotan, you are sort of scratching your head thinking, what do I do? So those are sort of funny cross-cultural, culture shock sort of situations that you'll find yourself in. Obviously, language can be another one. You know, you find it hard to communicate sometimes if your language skills are not up to scratch, or you think you know the word for it, but it's not quite, it's not quite the right word to use. Those things can be a little bit funny and cause some embarrassing situations. I remember the first time I tried to use malu and kamaluan, it didn't work out very well. So there, when you're moving overseas, or whether it's for study or work or whatever, travel as well, they can be things that you come across which, it does make you feel out of place or a bit uncomfortable or a bit awkward. But you kind of, you get past it. And if you're a sort of person who wants to be, who likes traveling and wants to sort of experience new cultures, it's sort of a given. You will feel uncomfortable and a bit out of place. So just sort of embrace it. I get looked at and stared at, and people talk about me all the time because, I'm the bule in the room, and, I'm a bit different to everybody, but it's sort of like, okay, I'm just going to ignore it, or I'm just going to, it's sort of fine for me now. And so I think, you just sort of, you learn to deal with these sorts of little things that come up. And of course, there's new things all the time, but because I've been in Indonesia for so long now, there's hardly anything that surprises me in Indonesia, to the point that I say, how I express things to Australians, sometimes they go, what on earth are you talking about? Like, you talk about it so normally. And because it is normal for me now. But for them, it's still very strange.
Yeah. I think what you need to do in terms of facing a culture shock is that first you have to accept culture shock will come to you every time you come to a new environment. Okay, whether Australians come to Indonesia or Indonesians come to Australia. So that was the case of example of the culture shock that Clarice mentioned to us about, toilet. I wonder that the squat toilet will also give you problem, Clarice. But my Australian friends, I think, shared lots of stories how they had to adapt with the squat toilet. It's a skill. It's a certain skill for people, non-Indonesians, of course, to be able to squat and do the business. It's not that easy. The second thing is that after you accept that the culture shock will be there when you come to a new environment, is that the second is that you have to be patient or sabar. Okay, new things around you, new ways of people doing things, saying things in every day will of course give you a shock or surprise, and sometimes you feel anxious about it. But be sabar or patient. It takes time for you to adjust with the new environment. For me, the first time I came to Australia was 1995. That was like for a short visit, actually, to visit my distant relative, almarhum Ahdiat Kartamiharja. He was an Indonesian sastrawan. Yeah, I think the Australian government given him like a citizenship in 1964. He's the author of Atheist, a novel called Atheist. Anyway, I visited him in 1995, and I was still very young, and I was like, I was shocked with how people, especially Australian, using sarcasm sometimes. It sounds like they're praising you, but they're actually saying bad thing about you. It took me like some time for me to realize that, that's actually an analogy, that's actually a sarcasm and all that. And then and then I come back to study my master's degree in Canberra. Also had to adapt again with the local environment. I didn't like Canberra in the beginning, but then I loved it because it's quiet and people are just really nice. And I just realized that I have to adapt with the way I communicate with people there. It's interesting because Indonesians used to be known as smiling people, at least in the 1980s, that Indonesians like to smile, saying hello, always, being polite, But then nowadays, actually, I found that Australians, especially in Canberra or in Perth, are actually more polite than Indonesians that I found here. Here, every time I smile to strangers when I was walking down the road to supermarket, and I smile at them, like friendly smile. It was like, what the fuck are you looking at? Apa lu lihat-lihat gitu. Like, oh, okay, right. I just stop being nice then. But that kind of, ethical practice, greetings every day, is something that is still maintained in Australian societies. At least in Perth, where I did my when I was studying at Murdoch Uni and then in Canberra as well. So living in the changing environments can make you very anxious, but just be patient. After a while, and you get used to it, and you will learn lots of things. You will absorb new things around you and mixing with your identity, your values, and all that. Once you return to your home country, you'll be a totally different person. So after you travel somewhere, live somewhere for quite times, and then you return, you will be a total different person. I become a different person since I returned from Australia. And again, I had to face another culture shock. Indonesians being shocked in my own country. So, but that's the beauty of it, I think, that we just keep changing,
Indeed. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think you also live in wrong neighborhood, Paps, yeah? people don't smile at you again, because I think if you live in a kampung, people will still smile to you. Sure.
That's true. This is what is mentioned by Bayan. That actually, it depends. Of course, yes, it depends where you live. In some areas you live with rough people. In other areas you live with the nice people. But here's what I can tell you, Bayan and Karina, or everyone. Yeah? People here are just nice sometimes, more often nice to bule than to locals. This is an example. I have this experience.
Agreed.
Yeah. So I live in a house complex somewhere in Arca Manik. Arca Manik is a nice place, really quiet. If you hate Bandung, it's too crowded, you come to Arca Manik. It's a great place to live, honestly. So I live in a complex, and this complex is guarded by this one security post. We only have one gate system, so people coming in and coming out through this gate. And I know well the security guards. And one day, one of the security guards invited me to come to their son's wedding. I was like, oh, I feel honored. I'm invited to come to his son's wedding. So the problem is that I had to come by myself and my wife, who is Australian, and everybody knows him, and my son, my mixed son, because everybody like Alex. Like, why didn't they like ever mention my name? Only Alex and my wife now. So one day I attended the wedding invitation, and they were surprised. So where's Kate and where's Alex? Where's my wife and my son? I'm like, we had to go home to Australia because of Christmas, and haven't returned. So, okay. And then you know what the security guard told me after that? Oh, that's too bad, because I was planning to take a photo with all of you. So without my bullet wife and my mixed son, they didn't want to take photo with me. So this is funny to tell, but also kind of bad. Ironic.
It's ironic, true.
Yeah, it's ironic because in a way, this is like, I don't know, I would call it unintended racism, actually. So yeah,
certainly. I think when you, in my experience, because I am white, and I've got blonde hair and blue eyes, that's something that a lot of Indonesians find incredibly fascinating. And for me, when I first came to Indonesia, I found it shocking. Like, why are you asking me for photos? What is it that is about me that is so encapsulating? They're like, oh my God, you're like a hantu, like you're like a ghost, like, can't believe how white you are. Is this even possible? And it does sort of, sometimes on occasion, it has made me uncomfortable, because I've been with other foreign friends who are also from Australia, but they may not be as white as I am, and it's sort of like, oh, we want the photo with Clarice, we don't really want the photo with these other people, or with my Indonesian friends that I've been with, and it sort of is like, what do I do in this sort of situation? And I think I've had obviously I'm in a privileged position when people are asking me for this, but I've found it useful over the last couple of years, because I've been here for so long, to actually talk to people about it and say, well, I'm not really that different from, my other Australian friends who might not be as pale as I am. So, you shouldn't just be sort of asking for my photo, like, and if you're going to ask for my photo, ask for the photo of all of us, not just me. Because it is something that I think sometimes, for reasons I still don't quite understand, Indonesians still they want that photo to post on random social media pages and things. But yeah, it's one of those things that I found, it was a bit of culture shock for me when I came to Indonesia, to sort of experience that, because we don't really do that in Australia. You see someone from another country and, okay, they're from another country.
True.
They're another person.
I think that's the reason why we have to build rooms or space like this, so we have much more broader understanding about each other's, right? So maybe if anyone want to ask question or respond to this topic, this will be the last one, I think. If there's not, maybe I can wrap things up, because it's 5 o'clock, more than 5 o'clock already. I think no one, but Bayan want to tell a story?
No, not necessarily. I just found Clarice's sharing really interesting and quite funny as well, even though I'm sure it's frustrating. But even I was just thinking back to in Gedung Sate when multiple people asked me for a photo, and I just thought it was surprising because, my skin color is not too different from most Indonesians. Even my name, some people think my name, because it is a lot of a lot of Indonesians will have Middle Eastern names, it's not particularly exotic. So I was just trying to imagine how difficult it must be, and frustrating almost, to constantly have so many people asking you for photos.
Yeah.
But knowing it's coming from a very pure curiosity, simple curiosity, right?
Yeah.
True, true.
Well, I got to be honest as well about our experience here living as a mixed family here in Ancaman, Bandung. I think it's also related to class stratifications in our society, and like I think who said that in the comments that you know most people here they see bule as actors or actors or popular people, which is pretty much that is. And Alchamanik is a part of Bandung that mostly consists of middle class to lower class people, working class people mostly live around here. And because they have or rarely engage with the people outside their own community, so to see a foreigner in their kampung, it would be like something like, wow, amazing. On one hand, they want to interact with you, but on the other hand, they're just too afraid with you. So in the end, they just ended up want to take a photo of you and take a picture of you and then show it to their families or friends. Look, I've taken a picture with a bule. In other words, the popular people, the actors or sort of like that. I found some of my international friends, they don't mind anymore about it after living in Indonesia for quite some time. My wife's still adapting with it sometimes because we do running together every week, at least 2 times a week here in Sport Jabar, a big sport center. And many people, they're doing the same, exercising, all that. So every time we run, my wife had to pretend that nobody's staring at her, but the fact is that people are staring at her and talking about her, and it's not easy for her, and I would understand that. Sometimes make jokes and just think that you're actually a famous people and all that. But yeah, some people couldn't stand that much.
Yeah.
I think it's related to class, and as you probably already know that class actually matters in whether we aware or not. It matters in terms of building social relationships. So people here knows my wife and my son. They know me as well, but my wife and my son is more popular than me in the complex because they're considered as the famous people and all that. I don't know. I think this is something that has to be worked on as well in terms of the relationship between the two societies. That in terms of instead of we fallen into that social gap that separates us, the bule and the locals, we should try to make some programs or efforts, social efforts, to make that actually such a distinction. It's no longer relevant. This is globalization, and we travels more than we do compared to the past. And there will be more Australians here in Indonesia, and there will be more Indonesians in Australians, and many other international people here coming to the country. So we have to get rid of that that mindset, something that we need to work on. Bule is also people like us, and us just also like bule as well, and we're just human beings. I don't know how to do it, but maybe I one day can create such a continuous programs that actually inclusive to all people, so this mindset can be changed.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's like should be the rooms for that, right? So
yeah,
it
Sorry,
might be.
Can I add something?
Okay, sure. Please.
Yes, I think, okay, hello, I am Salman from AEC. So I think it's about the friendly people is not depends on the where we are coming from. I think for Indonesian people, all are so friendly, but because we have what's that many different cultures and character, it's also they shows their friendly way in a different way like that. So for the example, I also got shocked when I met my supervisor. She's from Medan, like her friendly is not like Sundanese friendly, like if Sundanese friendly, they always smile and say hello, or just do something like lovely things. But when I say hi to Medan people, they will just say hi, whoa, and they always shout. But that's their way to show they're friendly like that. So I think that's all. Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
true.
I mean,
Yeah, I
everybody
think
has different ways of expressing themselves, and certainly different cultural groups have different norms of tone and greeting and all of that sort of thing, whether it's appropriate to hug someone or you don't hug
Yeah.
someone, and all of those sorts of things. It definitely comes into it. So definitely it's on a person to person basis.
true.
We
Like,
can
yeah,
we can no
definitely.
longer we can no longer we can't no longer we can no longer hug with one another now during the pandemic, unfortunately, Clarice.
That's right.
So I don't know
Good,
what's the next. Yeah,
good
I think that would
reminder.
be like the next greeting style that we have to do, unfortunately,
Yeah.
unless
Yeah,
the vaccines will be available for us. But I don't know
we
when.
live in an awkward world right now. Like people try
Awkward
to shake
word.
your hand and you're like this. So yeah.
Yeah, even we become awkward with our own families, you know. Hi, Dad. Hi, Mom. How are you?
All right. I think, yeah, it's been amazing 2.5 hours of this session. We talk
Yeah.
a lot about things, about relationship and how can we like push it further. And yes, both of our speakers mentioned before that it's true that we, the youths, can play a role in every level, like a lot of initiatives under the surface. And yeah, like what we have to do is just to keep informed and find out about what's going on and what can you do to involve in this. And certainly thing is music and arts in general. And yeah, if you like question yourself like what can you do, I think there's a lot. Like you can answer your own question thing.
And you're
And
already involved. You're already here. You're already,
Yeah, yeah. If you're here,
having.
you're already involved.
true, yeah,
And
so
also,
thank you.
before I forgot, I would like to add just something very important because
Sure.
during the pandemic, our physical interaction has become very limited, and we don't know until when it's gonna be. Is that in order to narrow the gap between us, between Australians and Indonesian, Australian youth, Indonesian youth, especially those who are involved or participated in AIYA, don't feel disheartened by the situation. I think whilst the formal programs that bridges Australians and Indonesians are having some crucial challenges at the moment, you know, what we can do now on daily basis is that if we have made friends with Indonesians have made friends with the Australian counterparts, and also Australians have made friends with Indonesians, and they're engaged in social media. Just continue to be, communicative with one another. You know, if your friend posting something, comment something, say hello, and yeah, just be original, be authentic in the communications, because I think that's the only way, the small way that we can do in order to maintain this relationship during the pandemic. And of course, programs like what AIYA is doing right now is also a big help for us to strengthen the relationship, and hopefully we can do things much better again ahead. Thanks.
Thank you, Indra. I think yeah, to add more about this, yeah, we in AIYA Jawa Barat feels much more productive actually since the COVID-19 strikes. So yeah, like that's the negative side, that we cannot have like a real meeting and have a like event, for example. But now we have much more online event, and we can connect more even with the one in Australia even. So yeah, it's been amazing time. Maybe Evelyn want to add?
Yeah, just in response to that, because we also have AIYA provide you like facilitating us to meet in the online discussion and also like activities. So if you register as a member, as AIYA members, you can join Flex. So it's like a flexible language exchange, because we're still running the language exchange online, and you can meet Australian friends there, and also like keep, you know, like doing the conversation, and also yeah, like have a chat and discuss about anything, different topics every Wednesday and every Sunday. So tomorrow we will have the session at 1 p.m. So if you want to join, you can look at the information on the AIYA National Instagram or AIYA Jawa Barat Instagram. And also, if you want to get the certificate from this webinar, you also can provide your details in the form that being shared in the link. Yeah, so there is like the link that being shared on the chat room, so you can fill it out and then also register as a member there. So yeah, and yeah, Clarice also mentioned that on the chat. So yeah, the link is also on the form, so you can do that on your own time. And yes, thank you, Dio, for being like a really nice moderator for today. And then it's really nice to have Hikmawan and also Clarice. We can definitely, you know, like get more like a discussion, and I mean, like we can discuss more on this on the other platforms later on. And also, if you guys want to have like a questions, but yeah, because we have like a limited time now, you definitely can like DM the AIYA Jawa Barat Instagram, or like straight away to the AIYA National. And this session is also being recorded, so hopefully we can get this yeah, like a session on the AIYA YouTube later on, so you can keep, you know, like a rewatching it, and then yeah, get the insights from it. So
before we close the session, can everyone put the video on? I want
yes,
to
please. We
reshoot.
definitely want to see you guys like virtually.
Good idea.
Yeah.
This is the Wi-Fi in pandemic session.
Hi, Maria. Maria is also like one of the AIYA committee, AIYA Jawa Barat committee before.
And if everybody wants to see the other people on the call, in the top right-hand corner, there should be like a gallery view or grid view. So if you just
yeah. All right. So we
Mia,
got
Anissa.
Yeah.
Who else? Ika, Heriska, Nabila.
Yeah. And yeah, Nabila there. Ika.
Angie.
It's like kind of like a reunion. Ika was my old friend back in Unpad before, and then we just like meet here.
Hi,
Dwiki, Anggi.
Hey, Ika and Wiki were my students.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Take a photo.
Yeah.
Give them a.
Give your best pose ya. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. One more. Okay. Awesome.
Okay. Right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Hikmawan, Indra, Papap.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Clarice.
No worries, guys. It's been nice to connect with you all, even though we're not all in the same place. Evelyn from Skyping in from Padang.
Padang right now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to do that from afar, even though we're not in Bandung.
Yeah. And
as we mentioned before, I think this like a lot of room we can make in the future like this.
Yeah,
yeah.
sure.
Awesome.
And yeah, this is definitely the way we adapt with the COVID-19 pandemic. So yeah, keep doing this, and then join the online discussion, and also register as AIYA member, so you can join the flex tomorrow. So I will see you.
Evelyn, I wasn't sure if I wasn't sure if I'm a AIYA West Java member or not. I think if I'm mistaken, Matt from AIYA West Australia have included in the membership, but I'm not sure. Should I register again or?
No, that's all right. So once you register to one chapter, it means that you are like a member officially.
Okay.
But if you want to,
when was the last time?
When was the last time? It must be like expiring right now.
Well, PhD students have been hiding in a cave for quite a while.
AIYA memberships last a year, so if it's within the last year, it's valid. But if not, sign up again. It's 50,000 for students and 100,000 for non-students.
Okay, alrighty.
But if you find any issues or like problem on registering as a member, so just contact us. Go straight away to the AIYA Jawa Barat Instagram.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much. Hope to see
Thanks,
you again
everyone.
in another
See you
session.
again. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, troopers.